Welcome. In this presentation, I want to talk to you about Azure Data Science Virtual Machines, a great way to jumpstart into machine learning, not only on Microsoft technologies, but really open source as well. Microsoft has embraced open source in a surprisingly immersive way, as I'll show you. The content of these slides is available on my GitHub account, so just go to github.com/bkafiki/shared, and you find not only this content, but many other presentations I do. A little about myself. I am a data solutions enabler for Microsoft. It's actually called Technical Solutions Provider, Professional. But my goal is to match up the correct technology with the customer, what will solve their problems, what will work well together, architect solutions, teach them on how to use the technology, etc., and just generally make sure the right technology is enabling the customer. I have decades of IT experience in healthcare, insurance, banking, and e-commerce. I'm a past Microsoft MVP. I'm also the author of Pro PowerShell for Database Developers, a riveting book, so I recommend you go on Amazon and buy it today. I found and lead two different groups. I read the past chapter, the Rhode Island Microsoft Business Intelligence User Group, and I also lead a group called the Greater Boston Area Data Science, Machine Learning, and AI Group. Both of these are on meetup.com. The Rhode Island one obviously is in Rhode Island, so if you look in that area, you should be able to find my group, and please join if you're interested. And if you're in the Greater Boston area, then you can also go to my Data Science and Machine Learning group. I'm a frequent presenter. In fact, just last weekend, I did 2 presentations at a local conference on Azure. And you can see my contact information, my email, my blog, sqlfi.com, and my LinkedIn profile, so feel free to connect on these. And please subscribe to my YouTube account because I'm coming up with new videos all the time. So why use an Azure Data Science VM? That's a question I kind of started with, and when I first started with Microsoft, I wondered, why would I need that? I can do everything on my own machine, pick the tools I want and install them. And I'm going to go over why it's such a great idea, and I really like it. And my first reason for myself was it made my life a lot easier. There's a lot of different data science tools, and unless you're really restricted to a single thing, like I'm just using R and I'm just working locally, you find yourself having to configure and install a lot of different tools. So for my job, where I'm doing a lot of different demos, presentations, and instruction, etc., it really works out well. The data science virtual machines, as you'll see, have everything pre-installed. So it's quick and easy to set up. It installs all the tools you need. There's no configuration hassles to worry about. You can turn it off when you don't want it. So it's very inexpensive, and you can focus on learning, or in my case, teaching, which is really what I like about it. So what do you get on an Azure Data Science Virtual Machine? Well, you get a lot, and more than this actually, but the things I look for mostly is, one, you get the Anaconda distribution of Python. And in any given point in time, that'll be like the latest, greatest. It'll get upgraded as you spin up new VMs, etc., the data science VM. So it's kind of nice. That includes, of course, the Python language, Jupyter Notebooks, and Spider, as you can see there, which is an IDE for Python. They also install PyCharm, the community edition. So you get a good support for Python. If you go kind of to the bottom of the slide here, you also get Microsoft tools, which a lot of my customers particularly use, like Visual Studio, and an editor that's really, it's the Visual Studio editor for more or less, called VS Code, but it allows you to just use the editor and plug and play with whatever technology you want to use. And then finally, there's R and R Studio, so you get both R and Python support for machine learning languages. And finally, the sort of biggest square here you see is SQL Server 2017, which has a really highly scalable, integrated machine learning server built into it. So it's one of the great value propositions, I think, right now to SQL Server. So if you have R or you have Python and you're trying to work with the open source versions and just get that, you're trying to scale, well, you'll find out very quickly open source R and Python don't scale very well. Microsoft bought a company called Revolution Analytics a few years ago, and they integrated their product, which was an R server, which used proprietary, highly scalable and performant functions. They all start with this prefix RX that allow you to scale to like hundreds of millions of rows. Multiple cores can be used, which open source R does not do. It will page memory in and out to be able to support larger and larger data sets. So it really allows you to scale at a much, much better level. It's somewhere between your big data solutions like Spark. It doesn't go to that level, but much, much higher level scalability than, say, you typically could get on a single machine with standard R or Python. So 2016 added R support for the server. 2017 they added Python support. Now this is a great thing in itself, and I'm going to have to do a much longer presentation on this. I do have something way back that I did, but The takeaway from that particular machine learning platform is you can integrate without moving data in or out of SQL Server. You can work with the data right on the server, right in memory, and scale up to whatever SQL Server can support, which of course is like hundreds of millions of rows and terabytes of data, and you don't have to move the data. Not only that, but if you're working in an industry and you're concerned, which most people are these days, about security, you've got all the security of SQL Server built in. So you have things like total data encryption. Are always encrypted. You have all kinds of support issues like scalability issues within SQL Server. You have the fact that authorizations and things are very secure. You can use Active Directory integration. You can do role-based integration and support. You've got a lot of great features. I mean, SQL Server is probably, I think, the most secure database platform. And now with Python and R, you can actually use all of that and protect your R and Python code and data within the SQL Server. And you also have tools like SQL Agent, so now you can schedule your jobs. And just to give you an idea of how much integration we're talking about here, the compiler to create stored procedures supports Python and R in 2017. So you can write stored procedures and functions in the R or Python language. And it has a separate service in the background running that allows it to scale. So it supports this as a service, just like it does analysis services and the database services. There's a service called Launchpad. So I could go on and on about that, but the main thing is it's very cool, very nice, and I'll talk about it later. But this is why I like the data science virtual machine. You can go in a few clicks, create it, and you got it. It's good to go. And I'll just show you all kinds of cool stuff why I like it so much and what's good about it. But let's go past this now and just take my word until I show you more. So first thing is, what do we do? How do we create a virtual science data? Excuse me. How do we create a data science virtual machine? Now I'll show you this. I'll walk through the slides and I'll actually do it. First is in the Azure portal, you'll see this. The sidebar has all your options and icons to create and manage resources. You click on the upper left where it says plus sign, create a resource, and then you get a window and you start typing what you're looking for. And just like you would search for anything, like in a web page or something, you can start searching here. And then you'll notice that on the right, it just starts listing what's available, and you see the data science virtual machine. And then you just see here, you got to push the create button, and it's called a blade, what opens up. And then you get some information you want to fill in, like, so anytime you create a virtual machine in Azure, you need to give it a system admin account and password. So that's what you see first happening. And you need a resource group. A resource group is just really like a container name that all of your resources are going to be tagged with. That allows you to do things like just delete them, for instance, all at once. If you say everything I created under my junk assets, we'll say, you can just delete it and everything goes away. So it's really a container to manage things, really. You also pick a data center location. Where's this VM going to be located? So I'm picking Eastern US 2, which is our second Eastern US data center. Now this is a key piece, and I made a mistake on this myself, so I'll give you some guides here, but you now pick up sort of the size of your VM. Well, we're trying to run SQL Server here, so we can't pick a lightweight machine, and it does some work in the beginning. So what I discovered is if I go too low on this, like say the first one where I'm only picking 4 gig of memory, it's not going to work very well, and that's in the SSD. It's even lower in RAM 1 gig. No, that's not going to work. I found the sweet spot for these is this where it's highlighted in blue. So you're getting 32 gigabytes of RAM, 4 virtual CPUs. You're getting enough processing power there to basically work effectively, and you won't have too many problems. If you can go more, go more. Again, the key to this is managing the resources, so if you don't want to pay a lot, that's fine. I don't think you will find it costing much at all. I haven't. Now realize I've done this kind of thing when all I had was an MSDN account and I had to manage $150 cost a month, doing a lot of demos and things. The key is just turning off resources. That's really the key on anything in the cloud. If you take away nothing else, remember, turn things off when you're not using them. Don't keep the lights on when you leave the house, and don't keep your cloud assets running when you don't need them. Okay, I feel kind of like my mother talking to me about the cloud, so it's kind of weird. Anyway, let's go to a little more on creating an Azure Data Science VM. Now you get this slide here, this blade, and if you notice on the left, it's kind of walking you through. It's almost like a little TurboTax thing, walking you through what you need to do. This is a great feature across the board in Azure. It's a lot of basically wizards to walk you through things. It's easy to use, which I really like. Anyway, on the left, most of these things you don't really need to touch much unless you want to get into more advanced resources and things. But most of these are taking default settings, which is great for me. I like things easy. But the one thing I do want to point out is the auto shutdown on the lower left side. I'll walk through this again. But the auto shutdown, you want to say yes, turn it on. And on the right side, you'll see you can now select when do you want to shut this off. This is really critical because you create something, you forget about it, and I've done this, and you don't turn it off, and 3 days later you just realize that your $150 MSDN license subscription is run out, and I have no more assets left. If you turn this on, the great thing is, at 7 o'clock every day, if this VM isn't running, it'll just turn it off, and I don't pay for it. So if you've been using it even in a work mode, set it to turn itself off at 6 or 7 o'clock every night. If you're not going to be at work and you're not going to be using it, why not just have it turn off and no pay the cost for it? Finally, you get through all this, and you have to wait a couple seconds when this screen comes up, and then the Create button becomes enabled, and you just click on Create. And then you'll see this little thing. This is whenever you create assets, VMs, etc. in Azure. You'll notice that this little sparkly box comes up, and you'll see there's a little message thing to the right, notifications, and it tells you it's building the VM. Now, I'd like to tell you the VM gets created in 10 seconds, but it can take like 20 minutes or so to, to completely build the VM. Once you do, you're good to go. So let's walk in, let's do a little walkthrough of that. So I'm going to go to Azure. I always say Azure, but I'm trying to be cool now and say Azure, but I'll say Azure because it's too hard to keep saying it the other way. All right, so we're in the portal, and all you have to do is just portal.azure.com, and then you go to this. If you're new, you can sign up for a new account. If you have MSDN, you can use that. Hopefully your company has a subscription. If not, tell them they really need to get one. But basically, what's really nice is in the portal, you have a whole bunch of options on the left. So these are things I can go to if I have like Azure Cosmos DB, a scalable, co-locatable, multi-model database, SQL databases, functions, all kinds of cool stuff. That's all on the left side. Now what I like here too is I have this dashboard. The dashboard is places I can tag assets I want to manage. And pretty much everything I'm creating, I'm using a shared subscription. So I like to tag them all so that my stuff doesn't get lost with all these other things out there. And you can see here it's got a list of my resources. But I've got a Databricks account, very riveting. I'll talk about that later. Didn't mean to click that. But anyways, all good stuff. So what I want to do now is I'm going to create a new resource. So one of the easiest ways to do it, I can go over here, and if I know I want a SQL database, I can do it right here. But if I don't see what I want, I can just create a new resource by clicking on the plus button, and I can just type in data science virtual, and I'm going to hit enter here, and it lists a bunch of things here. I find this is a little bit easier because now I can see everything available. Now what I want, of course, is this data science virtual machine Windows 2016. That's the latest, greatest. It's going to give me SQL Server 2017. If I wanted a Unix version or Linux version of that, I can go with Ubuntu Data Science VM. It's going to have more Linuxy type tools. CSPs are really like service provider type things, and that requires getting more licensing and whatever I'm using it for. So that's not appropriate here. One thing I did want to also look at is Geo AI VM, so you can get this kind of geo-focused one. Somewhere in here, I think there's also data science for that. Somewhere in here too. Oh, I was looking for this deep learning virtual machine. So if you're looking to really do deep learning, this machine, I believe, has the graphics CPUs or GPUs, so they work really fast with number crunching. So if you're looking to do that, you can use this. Now, we'll point out that the data science virtual machines are really more intended for learning purposes. The SQL Server edition you're getting is called the Developer Edition, so you're not paying any licensing fees. It's basically free, but you got to be careful because it's not intended for production use, and when you do start doing that, you might get into licensing issues. It's really meant, again, for learning, I think, is the best thing. Learning, demoing, playing with, that kind of thing. You can always create a machine that has everything later, but it comes with a lot of cool stuff. So what I would do here is just click on it, and it says all here, okay, you've got all these, all the different things that I'm going to get with it. I say create, and I'm going to go through here, and it's got all this stuff I showed you before. So I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to give it a username and password to go with it. I'm going to say, do I want to create using existing, so I have a lot of existing resource groups. Now I can create a new one. Sometimes I do like to create new ones for assets so that I can delete that resource group and get rid of everything related to what I've been working on. If I put it in an existing one, then I can't do that so easily. Yeah, let me go through this. I will create a VM, I think. I'll create a machine just to show this. So test Brian DS VM, just to make sure that name doesn't exist. I'm going to put in here test01 password. I'm not going to tell you what it is. That is bad practice. Maybe I didn't like that either. It does confirm you have a password sufficiently, robust that it won't be easily hacked. And then I'm going to put a resource group, and I'll call it test Brian DSVM. Pick the regions fine. Already have a Windows license. I'm saying no. I'm taking the default. I don't want it to prompt me for any sort of Windows licensey thing, so I'll say sure, I got one. I don't have one. It will, I guess, probably charge me extra for that, not having it, but I've never had issues with that. And so I'm going to go here, as I mentioned in my thing earlier. I want at least enough memory, so I'm looking for really 64 gig RAM. That's probably more than I need. I think this here will support it. And I do not want that to save that. All right, so go back here. This should do it. 32 gig of RAM. I'm getting VPUs or VCs. Virtual CPUs get 2. This should work. I'll go with that. Select that. And these are all the default settings, virtual networks and IP addresses. What I did want to kind of highlight here, is it here? Auto shut off. I want to say yes to auto shut off. And that's where you can see 7 p.m., which is a pretty good time. I actually like that default. But I don't live in Greenland, so I'm going to change it to Eastern Time, US and Canada. That's where I live. I'm in the Boston area. And I'm good to go, so I'll say OK. And finally, it's got all this stuff in it. And notice this button is not yet enabled. It should get enabled shortly. Uh-oh. It doesn't like something. Oh. All right, so I'm not going to be able to create this because my quota is exceeded. You would think I wouldn't have a quota, right? But I use a lot of resources, apparently. All right, so I'm not going to create this. I'll abandon it and let it go. But you saw the idea of what I was doing. I'm just creating a virtual machine. So let me close that out. And that's all you got to do. Once you're done creating the virtual machine, then you can go in and use it. So I'm going to jump right into demoing how to use it. I've got a few more slides which are riveting to see, but I'll go right into the demoing it now. So assume you've done all that. You click to create, and if your resources constraints are not limited, you're OK. And what I'm going to do here now is I've got this machine here. I actually set up for classes last week, the DSVM Student 01, and I just want to show it. So I can click on that. It would show up automatically. It would be like a sparkly box, as I mentioned, and then you can go in and click it. And you can see all these assets. And there's all kinds of properties associated with the virtual machine that I can go in and play with and look at, and it's all kinds of good stuff. Go back to my dashboard for a minute. And the main thing I wanted to go in here is I want to connect to this. And the way I'm going to connect to my virtual machine is by grabbing the IP address, copying it, and then I'm just going to go into this from... I had it on my, usually I put these things on my task bar, but I don't seem to have it. So I'm going to go to Windows Accessories, and I want to go to Remote Desktop. And you can actually use the Connect button here to do this and create an RDP, but I don't like to do that. I'd rather just go into the Remote Desktop, paste in the IP address, ask it to connect, and then it's going to ask me what's my username, password. So this is where, if you remember when we created a virtual machine, it asked us, what's the user ID, what's the password. So this is a systems admin user ID and password. Now here's a key takeaway. You may have your ID that you show subscription. This is not the same ID. This is a separate virtual machine. So this artificial machine you're creating in the cloud, it's an ID and password that goes with that. So in this case, I created one for this called STUDENT01. And then I have a password. And then finally I say OK. And it warns me about certificates and things, but I'm just going to go in. Now when you first do this, it may, the thing I would say is let it run for about 5 minutes because it's running a lot of utility setups. It's installing software. It's doing a lot of work for you initially. This particular machine was already created a while ago, so I don't have to really wait a lot. But you can even see now the little busy thing shows it's running. So be careful with this because I interrupted it once and it was actually using PowerShell scripts to install data on the SQL Server and installing Anaconda and doing all kinds of good stuff. And I kind of screwed up the machine because I interrupted it and said, control break, what are you doing? And you got to let it run. It can take a few minutes initially to get all the things set up. So what does it give us? All right, let's look around here for a minute. I'm going to go here because that's an easy way to see what we got. We can see we've got the Anaconda distribution, which has 32-bit versions of things and 62-bit. We get Spider IDE, and we get Jupyter Notebooks, which are very cool. We'll take a short look. I don't want to get into that. That's a different video demo, but you might want to go look at that. I have a whole presentation on that. Let me go in here also. I've got Excel, probably the most popular data science machine software used in the world, even though it's not really meant for that. And all these things, Map R and Microsoft machine learning stuff, Office tools, Power BI, which is a great visualization tool, analytics tool, SQL Server, as we can see, and all the tools that go with SQL Server. So you're getting all that kind of stuff. Node.js, there's all kinds, OneNote, I mean, just all Visual Studio, VS Code, as I mentioned. So you're getting a lot of different pieces here, as well as, let's see, you can hear RStudio. So you're getting RStudio. You also get the R language. And nicely, they put most of the software you need right on your taskbar at the bottom. I put all my common software on the taskbar. It's one of the really nice features in Windows. All right, so I'm in here and I want to do things. Now I also want to show you, you also have a link here. I can go here, and this will bring me to some tutorials and things that are useful. So here's a GitHub account, and you get some tutorials and software and things that talk about using, for instance, the data science VM. You got this Azure SDK docs, AI gallery. So depending on what you want to do, you see a lot of things. You also, of course, get PowerShell installed because that should always be on Windows. All right. So I'll do a quick little demo. I'm going to use the taskbar down at the bottom to start my Jupyter Notebook. And if you haven't used Jupyter Notebooks, one of the things it does is a browser-based IDE, basically uses a cell type of thing I'll show you. Very, very popular with development in data science because it supports multiple languages, including R and Python, both versions of Python and R, as well as Julia and myriad of other languages. So it takes a minute. And this is where if you pick a low-end VM without enough memory, etc., this will take even longer. So you want to pick something that, the one I picked is kind of a sweet spot. It's pretty quick. Now what I wanted to show you is look at all the different tutorials in notebooks you get right off the bat. So if you're interested, for instance, SQL Server R Services end-to-end tutorial, a great example of one. This actually shows you how to use the machine learning server built into SQL Server. And one of the things, for instance, at the top is if there's any packages needed in this demo, it's going to install them. And this is, again, an R notebook. And library reference here for Jupyter, doing all this stuff. It uses a connection string. And I'm not going to get into all of the notebook logic. This is really SQL Server, machine learning server stuff. But the really cool thing in this, and I recommend going through it, if you already have SQL Server, and you have 2017 or you can get to it, then you have a powerful, scalable machine learning server free. Basically, you already paid for it. And it allows you to use Python and R and really work with, this goes into like, I think it's like 1 million rows or something in the demo data set. But it can go higher than that. It can work out really well. If you have problems where you've got, you know, R or Python that's just taken a really long time to run on your machine and you have availability of SQL Server you could use, this is a way to really scale it up and speed it. Something that might take, you know, 3 or 4 hours to run. Probably if you set it up correctly in SQL Server, it could take a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes or so. If you have something where you're hitting memory constraints and it's actually crashing your machine, again, this is going to page memory in and out. And the trick to this, and I'm kind of going into a lot of tangents, so I apologize, but the trick to it is there's these commercialized functions that start with Rx that are all scalable. And Python has an equivalent version that does the same thing. So it allows you to scale to millions of rows. And you can see one of these pages, I think, actually shows you where it's paging memory in and out. And it does a thing called chunking. So it chunks memory in and out to do things. So it's very, very cool that way. Let me see if I got something here. Yeah, I don't see it in this particular thing. But you can see it's just all kinds of stuff here. And there's this one, I think it's either 100,000 or 1 million rows. So a quick thing about notebooks. So everything in notebooks runs in either documentation cells, which are like this, called markdown cells. And you notice up here, this determines when the highlighted cell, what type is it. So markdown is a markup language of a markup language. It's basically an HTML markup, which means where I see these 2 pounds, that's like an H2 tag. And to run the cell, I just press Shift and Enter on the cell when it's selected. And it renders it, in the case of Markdown, as documentation. Anything else you notice, like this is code. And then you've got things raw and heading. But most of it, you either have code, which is Python, R, or something, and then annotations to document it. These are really popular for research and things because you can share them with your friends, you can integrate, people can collaborate, really. That's the key. And I can, you know, pick a tile and move it down. I'm going to move this cell down. I can move it back up. I can cut. I can insert a cell. Then I can remove that cell. If I want to save, I can do a save here. If I have something running out of control, I can use this to interrupt the kernel, because maybe I ran something against a trillion rows and I didn't really want to do that. So you get all kinds of things. You got all kinds of things, widgets and tools you can put in. A lot of great features. Like I said, go look at my other video if you want more introduction on Jupyter Notebooks. You can import them, export them, all kinds of good stuff. So the Jupyter Notebooks alone, having that and having all the tools with it, like SQL Server integration, R and Python installed, and it even has notebooks and things for Spark. So Spark, local copy of Spark is also installed. So again, it's a great all-in-one place to learn about machine learning. And if you haven't used Spark, in my mind, there's sort of 3 tiers of machine learning that I really focused a lot on. There's sort of your local client thing where you're working with your local open source on your own machine stuff, which doesn't scale real well. Then you can go to something like Machine Learning Server, which will scale into the hundreds of millions of rows. It's intended really more for structured data, like a database. Really great for operationalizing what you're doing because it's all self-contained in the database, etc. And then finally, you've got something like a big data tool like Spark or Hadoop, where you're going to really mega scale. You're going into petabytes or greater, and Spark is designed for that. And you even have some tutorials in here that talk about some of that stuff. So you get a lot of different pieces in here, and just all these different places you can play with. So if you want to look at Azure ML notebooks, you can take a look at this one, and there's nice notebooks for that. So the notebooks are really meant for learning on this. They're pre-installed and ready to go. Yeah, and here's like MML Spark. And Spark has its own libraries, just like the RX functions I mentioned. Spark uses the MLL library, machine learning library. How's that? All right, so let me close this. And then I just need to, when I'm done, I want to interrupt this. So I do Control-C, Control-Break, and that should interrupt this. See, that takes a minute. Okay, got rid of that. And that's mostly what I think I want to show you here. So I'm going to just kind of shrink this for a minute and go back to my riveting slides. Okay, so once we saw the DM, this example is called My DSVM. Once that VM is created, we can click on it. And we saw that we can copy the IP address. Just do the little click to the right of it, and it will copy it into the control panel, whatever. What do we call that? It'll copy it for you. And then we can go here and just paste it in. And then it's going to prompt us to log in. If your settings are looking at other things, just go to more choices so that you can enter the user account and password that you set up. And again, that's going to go back to what you originally entered when you created the virtual machine. What account and password did you give it? So make sure you write that down. Otherwise, you're going to have to just delete it and start over. And here we enter our admin account and password. And you get warnings about certificates. You can go through that. And finally, this little red box I put is just wait until the VM is set up and initialized. So you might have to wait a little while for that when you first connect. Once you're done with that, it'll be good. I will say also, if the machine isn't shut down, I'll show you how to shut that down too. When you shut down a VM and you restart it, you don't pay for things. So another key concept in Azure is compute is separate from storage. Storage is really cheap generally in the cloud. Okay, that's one not very well kept secret. Generally, storage of data is pretty cheap, and if you store it in sort of slower hardware, slower hard drive kind of stuff, then it's even cheaper to store. You're paying more mostly for the compute power. When you're creating these VMs, etc., you're paying for that. So what you want to do is turn them off if you're not using them. We set an auto turn off if we did it. When you create it and you do the auto turn off, you're saving yourself the risk of forgetting. But go back to my VM. So let's go. So again, just to kind of show you, we've got a data science VM. We go here. And if I go here, I can say stop. So see this, I can stop it, and that will stop the VM. And I'm not paying at that point. I won't have to pay for that. Now, if I have some storage, I might be paying for something somewhere. If I put blob somewhere or whatever, actually, this should pretty much cost you pretty much nothing at that point, or very little. But you turn off the machine, you're not paying for the compute. So that's the beauty of it. But all those notebooks, all the things that were created on that VM, if we come back and we spin it up again, we just say restart it, it brings it all back and we haven't lost anything. So that's a nice feature. So I'm actually going to let it stop this because I don't really need it anymore. So I'm going to say stop the VM. And you can see over here it's saying I'm stopping that virtual machine. If you go over here, you can see it's giving you a message. And you can see here it tells me that the VM stopped. It takes a little longer than that. You can see over here it's not really done stopping it. But I can't use the VM while it's doing that. And it should have probably disconnected me also from the terminal connection. All right, so that's about it. Let me end it on that note. I can't think of anything else I need to say there. So the bottom line is, if you're looking to get into data science, you want to play with Python, R, and things like that, especially if you want to use the more complex things, maybe Spark or SQL Server integration, etc., then it's a really good way to just jump in and be able to play with it and not have to worry about installing a lot of software, configuring that software, spending hours trying to figure out what isn't set right. There's a bit set wrong here, a service isn't running, it doesn't like this. The VM takes care of all that for you, and you can do it really inexpensively. It's not like you're creating a heavy-duty resource. I usually do it. It's usually you can see the cost there. So the cost charges you're seeing are per day. So if you're doing it for heavy-duty use, you probably want to go to your manager or whatever and get approval at your company to create a more official subscription. If you're just trying to learn and play around, you can do like go in and sign up for a couple $100 free account for a month, and you can play with that and use the credits. Just turn it off when you're done. So that's my only real advice there. But otherwise, it's great. I've used them now. I had to do a training class. I created 10 of them for a bunch of students last week, and they all were able to connect like that, log in and do work. And when I was done, I was able to just shut them off. So it works out really well, and it's a great way to learn about data science. So thanks for watching, and please subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, leave comments. I appreciate it. Thank you.